The way that a lot of people would define something like subjective moral relativism is that something is moral if and only if the subject herself believes it. So if you hold to or committed to a position, then that whatever that is, that's moral for you. Most of us don't think that model has any merit to it because it has heaps and heaps of problems. The biggest one might be something along the lines of that morality is something where we're bound with regard to our actions and attitudes towards other people. So, right there, my personal belief or personal judgment has no check against other people would be one of those big flaws of that kind of way of thinking about what it would mean to be moral. A lot of conflict where people refuse to engage, refuse to be tolerant of some of the legitimate differences. And I think there's quite a bit of room there, morally speaking. Those are cases where relativism is going to sort of incline a subject, if they're inclined towards it, to retreat into some kind of sort of self-serving attitude where they feel like entitled that they can do what they want with their people or to other people, or they don't have to care about other people. If you're a subjective moral relativist, then your belief is good enough, right? Whatever that is. But if your belief is contrary to the good of public health or the common good in some more general sense, then, whatever you're going to be inclined to do is not necessarily going to have to take into account the harms you may be contributing to other people or the risks of harms that you're exposing them to. Is it permissible to drink and drive? Most of the people would say no, especially at whatever level it means to be intoxicated. If I think, oh no, it's cool, whatever, then I might be inclined or less worried about the potential consequences or harms I might expose other people to. So even if you get away with it, right? I did fine this one time. That's inconsequential to whether what we did was morally permissible or not. Because again, it's not just the actual harms that we contribute to other people, but the potential risk of harm. And as we do things like get intoxicated and try to drive or operate heavy machinery, we're going to increase the level of risk we're exposing others to.
So what are some other philosophical issues with moral relativistic thinking?
Yeah, so there's a good number of issues that particular framework faces, things that really kind of bury it into quite a deficit. So one is what we might say is an issue of moral progress or the lack thereof. So if morality really is subjective, meaning just by whatever I believe at a given point in time is what's morally binding to me and no one else, and whatever you believe and vice versa. Well, then, if I change my mind, I haven't made progress, morally speaking. I've just altered the moral universe. Now, if we look at this in terms of the big picture, what that would mean is if these types of approaches to thinking about how we might define what is or is not moral are correct, then someone like Martin Luther King Jr., who today is hailed pretty universally as, a really good example of a moral reformer who helps initiate a significant moral progress. A lot of us think the civil rights movement made a lot of progress, for example. If relativism is true, then King is not a good person, or he was not, right, a good person, because, if you look at his approval ratings before his assassination, he, as his family will point out, when people try to celebrate him in certain ways today, he was very significantly, by a substantial majority of people in the United States, disliked, right? They thought he was a bad person. Now, if we think we've made progress on those issues, even if it's an imperfect progress, but we think it's even capable of making progress, and we think that someone like King did good by helping sort of push us in that direction, and he's not alone, there's plenty of others, then, relativism is not going to help us figure that out, because relativism is to say he is bad, you might think he's good, but, your view now is, binding again only to you, and your judgment is limited then to you. It's like saying, I like this or that. Sort of reduces moral claims to, I like this or I like that, which is not what moral claims seem to be about.
It's like starting fresh from scratch, trying to make your own moral concepts. If you don't take any, ideas from past philosophers or people who have created moral structures, then that doesn't move the ball forward, figuring out what is good and what is bad.
General problem underlying it that isn't just unique to moral relativism is, as we change the yardstick, so to speak, what we're measuring, we can't measure with one thing, A, and then say, no, now we're going to measure with B and say that there's progress, right? Because if we've changed from A to B as our unit of measure, whatever that is, we're not measuring the same thing anymore. And so maybe, moral progress is not about stable values. Maybe moral progress is more subtle and refined to the extent that might be possible. Or maybe it's really complicated.